Hello out there in podcast land. This is your, let's see, what are we? This is the voice of Friendship Village coming at you once again for another interesting podcast here in our elaborate studios on the second floor. And we have a most interesting guest with us today. Of course, our loyal followers will recognize that I always say that. But all of our guests are interesting, so I'm not pushing or making. Oh, I'm trying too hard. Okay, let's relax here for a moment and get down to business. And the first order of business is to tell you who our sponsor is for this episode. Our sponsor is the Friendship Village Auxiliary. There's another word there. What should that be? Club, not club. Organization. Mm-hmm. Organization. Friendship Village Auxiliary Organization. That's an organization that does some important work. We respond to the needs of those who are in nursing care at our facility, the lodge, the wellspring, and try and make their lives a bit better. And we appreciate all the people who have, over the years, been a part of the auxiliary, done some very important work. And our guest today has had a major role in that over the years, and we'll hear more about that soon. Okay, so the auxiliary is open to anyone who wants to become a member, and all you need to do is pay $5 for a yearly membership. And if that seems a little steep, just come to one of our meetings. We meet on the third Thursday of each month, and we'd love to have you and let you see what we do. And let's go on then. The next order of business is a joke. We all like a good joke, or I like a good joke. So since I'm talking, we're going to have a joke. And here we go. This man walks into a bar. He's the only one in there except for the bartender. And so he sits at the bar and has his beer. And pretty soon he hears a little voice and it says, "Oh, I certainly like the color of your tie." And he looks around, but nobody can be seen. So he goes ahead and tries to enjoy himself. And a little voice again mumbles in the background and says, "You know what, today you are very color coordinated. My, that's good." So he looks at the bartender and says, "Sir, have you been trying to tell me something?" And the bartender said, "Oh, hey, that's just the peanuts, and they're complimentary." Okay, did you get that? Complimentary
That's
peanuts.
Told it last week.
Did I tell it last week? Yeah, but
well, some people might not have gotten it.
Okay.
The peanuts are complimentary.
Peanuts are complimentary. So that's why you didn't laugh at all, Mary, because you've heard it. Okay. All right, I got it. Okay, well, let's get on then to our important part of this program, and that is to introduce our guest and start a conversation. Mary, tell us who is here today.
All right. Today our guest is a very well-known gentleman in this area in Friendship Village. He is the retired former director of the Waterloo Playhouse. And we welcome you, Chuck.
Thank you, Mary.
Is your real name Charles?
My real name is Charles.
All right, gotcha. But everybody calls him Chuck. How long have you lived here?
I have lived here 8 years, I think. You're asking me hard questions.
Oh, yeah. But in and around 8 years' time.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll start out with, we'll go backwards. We'll find out, where were you born, raised, and went to school?
I was born in Indianapolis, Indiana. After 6 weeks, I realized this was not the right place for me to be, and I convinced my parents to move to Chicago, Illinois.
My, such influence.
And that's where my father had a job. we lived in Chicago proper until the war, and that's where I went to nursery school and kindergarten. I have no idea what school it was. Then, when he joined the Navy, my father was looking at both of you. Here we are, three of us wearing glasses. My father was in that same boat. He had to go to Milwaukee to join the Navy.
Oh.
The Chicago recruiter wouldn't take him. I went to school during the war in Hollywood, Florida, where my mom lived with her dad and his wife. I went to school in Virginia Beach, Virginia, one of the places my dad was stationed. And this name you'll probably recognize, Pensacola, Florida.
Pensacola, yes.
He was at the Pensacola base.
Okay.
He spent most of his time on the USS Franklin, aircraft carrier.
Okay. He was a career Navy man.
No, he joined the Navy when the war broke out.
Oh, okay.
Second World War?
Second World
Second
War.
World War, right.
Yeah, okay.
And let's see, I was born in 1937. And so he must have joined in 1943.
Okay.
I don't remember. I remember Pearl Harbor was December 6th.
Yes.
What I don't remember is whether it was 42 or 43.
It was 1941. Wasn't
41.
It? When it
41. So he didn't join right away.
Okay. Okay.
After the war, we settled in Evanston, Illinois. And that's where I lived through grade school and high school. So I went to grade school and high school in Evanston, Illinois.
And did you have brothers and sisters in
I am
Evanston?
an only child of two only children.
Wow.
So
Very small unit there.
very small unit. We have cousins in Sioux City, but they're all, second or third cousins. My grandmother and grandfather on my father's side. My grandfather's brother married my grandmother's sister.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know if that made the cousins closer or not. But they had, my grandparents on the Stillwell side had 3 kids. And one of them had 3 children, the other had 2. So those are the closest I ever had to
Right. You probably
siblings.
were very spoiled then as being an only child.
Well, I don't think so.
Okay.
But
You always wonder that when you hear their only
Yeah.
child.
Yeah.
Then after you graduated from high school, where did you go?
all over. I started out at Purdue University to be an engineer. Transferred to Iowa State University because I wanted to be, and I can't even remember what it was, a specific branch of engineering.
Okay.
At Iowa State, my freshman year at Purdue, I had a speech teacher who said he was directing the fall play at Purdue and wanted me to try out.
Wow.
So when I got to Iowa State, and the only person I knew was my cousin, I thought, well, okay, this would allow me to get involved. I went down and tried out for a play and got cast in the lead role on probation. Finally, on opening night, I asked the director if I was still on probation or was I going on. From that point on, unfortunately, my engineering grades went down because I was paying much more attention to theater. And
You remember what the name of the play was?
My Three Angels.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
My Three Angels. Okay.
I did it again years later at the Pasadena Playhouse, which is where I got my bachelor's degree.
Okay.
After a year and a half or 2.5 at Iowa State, I finally switched from engineering to telecommunicative arts because there was no theater program. So I did a lot of radio and television. I did live radio and television. In those days, the students got to do live shows on WOI.
Oh, yes.
And I also did a lot of broadcasting on WOI-FM. But I also worked on or was in every play for 2.5 years. I went to the Pasadena Playhouse. That's where I got my bachelor's degree, cum laude, and worked for a little while in Hollywood doing little tiny parts. And
Did you have aspirations of maybe settling in Hollywood? And
apparently not, because I only stayed through the summer after I graduated.
okay,
I was in a show, then I left to go on tour. I toured for a little over a year with the American Repertory Players. We did 8 shows in repertory all over the country. Churches, schools, what have you.
yeah. Okay.
And I forget how many states I put, 40, not 48, but in the 40, 41.
So did you have a specific role in each of these 8 productions that you just...
Over the time I was there, there were the 2 we added 2 while I was there. Those I played Winnie the Pooh and Winnie the Pooh.
Okay.
And I played the lead in...
Okay.
But it was a new script about a doctor in Korea.
Okay.
And the rest of the shows, I started out in the smallest possible part, and over the year, I played the second biggest part, and then the lead, if it was a male lead.
Yeah.
So I got to play 20-some parts in a
see,
year.
Yeah.
Every once in a while we were changing. The other thing is, I switched from an acting major to a directing major while I was at the Playhouse.
Okay.
So I got to direct 2 or 3 shows. But while I was at the Bishop's Company, American Repertory Players, our director got switched. They had 2 or 3 troupes going all over the country. And the other troupe lost their director. And all of a sudden he turned to me and said, well, you wanted to be a director. This is now your company. And he was gone. So I learned a lot in that year. Because we did not have the same people for the whole year. We were bringing in new people. People were leaving the company because their contract was up or going to the other company. That's also where I learned to direct myself.
Okay.
Because I couldn't stop being a member of we toured with 6 people. So everybody had 2 jobs.
Yeah.
Before I was actor-director, I was actor-technician, actor-prop manager, actor... I was never company manager.
Okay.
That's the one in charge of...
Now this is before you got married?
Before I married Patty.
Before you married Patty.
Patty
Okay.
and I got married when I moved to Waterloo.
Okay.
This is where we met.
Thinking of your acting, when you played in so many places, it must have been pretty easy for you to memorize your parts.
It was terrible.
It was terrible.
I could cram. And also, when I joined the company,
Yeah.
and I replaced a guy who just left, I had to learn 6 shows in 6 days. At the end of those 6 days, I had to learn it all again. Because it was like, okay, cramming for an exam.
Yeah.
I learned tonight's show. I learned the next night's show. That's all I did all day. I sat in the back seat. We had a 3-seat station wagon and pulled a trailer. I sat in the back and somebody cued me while I was frantically learning tonight's show.
Somehow
but-
you made it through.
I made it through.
Wow.
And every once in a while, you're going and you just... Somebody said, well, do you just pick a line from another play? I said, no, you try and stay in the subject matter you're in. But you sometimes have to make things up because you go blank or somebody else goes blank. So one of the earliest lessons I had, and one I always tried to teach my actors, is what's called the art of defensive acting. Based on what they say about learn to be a defensive driver.
Yeah.
I say, be prepared for something to go wrong. something doesn't go wrong every night,
Yeah.
but something goes wrong on, I'd say, 70% of the plays
Okay.
some night.
All right.
And the people who are ready to go with it
Mm-hmm.
are the ones that have the most fun and roll with it.
Roll with it.
And what you hope is the audience doesn't know you've edited. One time, one of the plays I did, somebody jumped, 8 or 10 pages. And my mouth is going with where we are, and my mind is saying, how do I go back and pick up these 8 pages? Because without them, the end of the show doesn't make any sense. Fortunately, we did the show that night that didn't make any sense and left town the next morning. And people thought, boy, these people do weird plays.
Such an experience. Such
Oh,
an
my
experience.
gosh.
So,
Well, it certainly helped me a lot when I became a full-time director.
oh yeah. So what brought you to Waterloo then? Got you here in the central part of the United States?
I was directing at a theater in North Carolina, in Raleigh, North Carolina, at North Carolina State University. I was not a faculty member, I was a staff member. We ran a theater program, we didn't teach.
Okay.
And from there, I interviewed for the Waterloo job. And that was when the Hope Martin Theater was being built. It was when the Playhouse was performing in the old theater in your lap. I was 65.
Okay.
And so I was overseeing the construction of the Hope Martin Theater. And I taught classes in the summer. I came here in July or August. I'd been in a summer theater in North Carolina.
Okay.
And I taught acting classes. Because the rec center kept postponing its opening, I came up with a Reader's Theater show. Firstborn was the first show I did here. It was a Reader's Theater show we did in what is now the WCP Walker Building. It was
yeah.
then the temporary rec center.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Very small.
Yeah. Yeah, they did performances there for a year between when the old school was torn down, where the theater in your lap was, and the new theater wasn't built yet.
Okay.
And we finally opened the first show in December. You Can't Take It With You. And Pat was in my acting class. I think she worked on Firstborn and maybe took over a role. And then she was in You Can't Take It With You.
Okay.
And I ended up in You Can't Take It With You because a week before we opened, one of my actors got hurt.
Oh.
So I played the first weekend, small part.
Well,
Yeah.
you're used to cramming a whole play into
Yes,
your mind
yeah,
there
yeah.
in one day.
And I've done that many times over the years.
Jeepers. Yeah.
So that's how we opened the Hope Martin Theater. And Patty and I slowly got to know each other. And in February of my second season here, we got married.
What year was that?
67.
67. Okay.
So 33, 43, 53. We've been married 57 years.
Okay.
All right.
And you had a couple children?
Tyler was born in 70, and Jeremy was born in 77.
Okay.
And Tyler, fool that he is, followed his father into the theater business. He's directing at NIFA in Los Angeles and doing some writing.
Mm-hmm.
And Jeremy did some plays, some by choice and some by being drafted by his father
Yeah.
when he couldn't find somebody that age. But he didn't stay with the theater business.
Okay.
But he's enjoyed theater his whole life. And
Mm-hmm.
he lives in Seattle. Tyler lives in L.A. So both our boys are
Out in the West
as
Coast.
far west as you can go without
Yeah.
leaving the continent.
Right. And you guys decided to stay here and retire.
Well, it made the most sense. Patty's mother, Blanche Shelton Sabo, had lived in the village for 22 years
Wow.
and stayed in the same apartment until she broke something, and that's when she moved to the lodge.
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay.
she was determined to move back, but by the time she was fully recovered, she pretty well liked her room at the lodge.
Right.
And then she spent her last few weeks, maybe months, at the landing
Okay.
when she needed full-time care.
Mm-hmm.
But so we knew a lot about this place
Right.
Yeah.
from her.
Mm-hmm.
And Jeremy tried to convince us to retire to Seattle. And we thought if we did that and he wanted to move,
There you'd be.
yeah, more to the point there, he'd be stuck because he'd feel guilty.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
And plus, by staying here, we still have a lot of friends in the Waterloo area.
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
And I've obviously gotten to know a lot of people I didn't know very well
Right.
in the 8 years I've been here, and have gotten very involved in the village.
Right. You have.
So-
We like people that like to get involved and can
I
get a
highly
hold
recommend it.
of a position and go with it.
Yeah, you were talking about the auxiliary.
Yeah.
I was the chairman of the brunch and bazaar
For how many years?
for 5 years,
5.
one of which didn't happen because
Right.
of COVID.
Oh, okay.
But we did all the prep work.
Yeah,
It wasn't
Getting
canceled.
ready for it. Sure.
So then we had a 3-year hiatus. Last year was my last brunch and bazaar. I thought 5 of these is enough.
Mhm.
And they're moving along quite steadily, getting ready for the 13th of April
Right.
for this year's. And if you're listening and don't have tickets, get tickets.
Right.
Right.
By the time this airs, I think the brunch will be over, though.
Okay, well, get tickets to next year's.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you went this year and enjoyed it, get tickets for next year.
And if you skipped it, come next year.
Now, back to the theater again. Now, Patty went on to do costuming, didn't she?
Once they hired me, the first year I was the only employee. The second year I was allowed to hire a part-time in salary scene designer technical director. And Patty came on board as a volunteer head of costumes.
Okay.
She'd done some costume for me at a theater in Indiana. I was here 2 years, 65 to 67. We went to Indiana for 3 years. When I came back in 70,
Mm-hmm.
I was the artistic director.
Okay.
And finally I convinced her she needed to be on payroll.
Okay, you're right.
And she was always a part-time salary and varied from a part-time job to a time and a half job,
Right.
depending on what happened with other people. She retired 08 or 09, and I worked on until 2014.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
And you took Greg on then in the meantime.
well, Playhouse was here, Children's Theater was here. When I first came to work, my employer was the Waterloo Recreation Center.
Mm-hmm.
They farmed me out to the Playhouse to be artistic director and to the Children's Theater to be on the board. And one of my first board jobs on Children's Theater, it was to direct the Junior League show. And then when I came back solely as the director of the Playhouse.
Okay.
I think I was then elected to the Children's Theater Board
Mm-hmm.
and conned into continuing direct a show a
Right.
year. But eventually, Children's Theater Board had burned up all of their board members to the point where they were going to dissolve. They came to me and said, would Playhouse consider merging with Blackhawk Children's Theater? And since they went to me and not the board, by then I had a staff. And I went to the staff and said, if we do this, the first year is going to be really, really tough because we're going to take this on
Yeah.
and all of a sudden be doing more shows without guarantees.
Mm-hmm.
And once the staff bought into it, I took it to the board.
Okay.
And the board voted, and we became Waterloo Community Playhouse / Blackhawk Children's Theater.
Right.
And so...
And it still is that arrangement?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It's varied over the years, but I hired a young man, a recent graduate. It's terrible, I can't remember his name. My only excuse is I'm old, and it's been several years. But he was my first children's theater director.
Okay.
And he'd been in a show for me. I'd seen his work at UNI. And I directed, I was in a show the first year. I was the voice of a tree in Hansel and Gretel.
Okay.
Oh.
And that's when Patty also became a writer. Because all of a sudden we realized we didn't have a viable script for Hansel and Gretel.
Oh.
We knew the story.
Yeah.
Everybody knows the story.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But finding a good script is different.
Right.
But she also adapted Christmas Carol for us, Little Women for us, Little House on the Prairie,
Okay.
and then she wrote 2 original scripts. So she was a writer and a costume designer.
Right.
Wow.
And when she took the job on, she thought, well, I'll get other people to do shows, and all I'll have to do is line up chairmen. Proved not to be as easy as she thought. We eventually grew enough. Through the 70s, the Playhouse grew like Topsy. And by the end of the 70s, we were the largest community theater per capita in the country. We weren't the largest. Places like Omaha and Midland, Texas, cities that were much larger than ours, were larger than we were.
Yeah.
But for a town the size of Waterloo, we were the largest community theater in the country.
Wow.
And I became active in the National American Community Theater Association and learned a lot going to those conferences. And we expanded the program to where we were doing a new play every year. That was my pride and joy.
Oh. A new original first time?
Most of them were first time.
Okay.
Some were first time in this country. I saw some Canadian plays when we went to see theater. And I said, could we do the U.S. premiere of this? And they let me.
Okay.
Sometimes it was the first time in the Midwest
Okay.
because they'd been done once somewhere.
Okay. Wow.
But I'd say over half of them were brand new scripts.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a lot of playwrights in residence over the years. So I got to be good friends with 2 or 3 of them.
Okay.
Others just passing acquaintances.
Mm-hmm.
But it was always exciting
Mm-hmm.
to do a new work and to have a playwright come in and see if they agreed with what I was doing with their play.
Oh.
Usually I tried to bring them in the first week of rehearsal, then they'd go home and I'd bring them in for the opening. But I wanted them here early because I didn't want them here the week before I opened saying, no, this is what this means.
Right.
Not that I wasn't afraid to use the phone and say, what does this mean? Why does he say this?
Yeah.
But usually I have those questions by the first read-through.
Something I was always curious about is auditioning. Did you sit in on all the auditions?
All the Playhouse auditions.
Yes.
The first year I sat in on BHCT auditions. After that, after this first young man, we hired Tom Ballmer, who went on to be the director of a theater in Mason City till he retired last year. And then we hired Greg for 8 years. After Greg,
Greg, that we know.
Yeah.
Greg Holt.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
then I hired Greg, and Greg left here to go to,
Cedar Falls.
no, that was the second time.
Oh, second time?
First time he left here to go to Arkansas,
Oh.
Little Rock. And that's when he started doing more film work and commercials.
Mm-hmm.
Then after Greg, I hired my son Tyler.
Yeah, right. I
Was
remember
our
he
children's
worked for you
theater.
for a while.
Yeah, for 6 years. Then when he left, we hired Anita, who is now the executive director
Right.
of the Playhouse. She went from being children's theater director to the executive director of the whole operation. Now, with her doing that, children's theater and the Playhouse are still, they don't have separate boards, but they have separate seasons. But
Oh, yeah.
some people work, a lot of the people work in both.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But back to auditions, I always thought that was kind of interesting when people auditioned for something and how you go about, lining them up and defining them and getting them the actual one you want.
Well, sometimes you're lucky and you need 6 people and the right 6 people are right there. People say, well, what's your ideal audition? I said, only 6 people try out for 6 parts and they're all perfect for one.
Right.
That
Yeah.
No
very
problem there.
seldom
No
happens.
problem there.
Usually, I get a ton of people trying out and I have to say no to more people than I say yes to.
Yeah.
Or I need 20 people and have 8 try out. So then I'm on the phone recruiting.
Okay.
But the audition process for me is, I always believed in open auditions because my first year here, I went down and introduced myself to the director in the Cedar Rapids. He got to be a good friend of mine, Don Tesher. And he said, I'm going to tell you the biggest mistake I ever made. We were doing, and I don't remember the name of the show anymore, but it was a classic with the 2 very demanding roles. And he said, I cast those in the fall, in the end of the season, in the spring. Then when I had auditions, I said, we're auditioning for anything but these 2 parts because they're already cast. And people showed up that would have been brilliant in those roles. So I said, I never precast again. I made that mistake once because in one of the new plays I did, the author convinced me I needed to bring in a professional because he was sure his plays could have. The professional was not as good as 3 people in the show. And that's when I thought, we're never doing this again.
Yeah.
And don't you have to pay a professional?
Oh yeah, we had to.
Yeah.
We raised money to pay them and find housing for them.
Mm-hmm.
But that was the only way we could do the script. And everybody bought into it, but it didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
But they say you learn more from the things you do wrong than the things you do right.
Absolutely.
That's right.
So that was one of them. But what I do is I usually have, on a straight play, by straight I mean non-musical,
Yeah.
I have 2 nights of auditions and then a callback. If after the 2 nights of auditions I don't have the people I need, then I start recruiting. And at that point I'm recruiting, I may call you and say, would you audition for this part? And then you take a script and say, yes I will, no I won't. But I'm not offering you the part yet.
Right.
Once I get past callbacks and I still don't have parts filled, then I'm offering parts.
Okay.
Then I'm saying, Phil, will you play? For a musical,
Yes, I will.
thank you. For a musical, we usually had 4 nights of auditions.
Right.
Because besides me, the audition was done by me, the musical director, and the choreographer. So we all, and sometimes we agreed, and sometimes we didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes we would have the final callback, and it would just be, oh, here, 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 here. We've cast Fiddler on the Roof. And everybody was happy with it.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes that process took 2 or 3 hours because we didn't agree on, it wasn't all the parts,
Yeah.
but there'd be this part or that part. And we'd all agree, this person has a beautiful voice but can't act.
Oh, yeah.
This person acts beautifully but can't
Can't
dance
sing.
a step.
Yeah.
And ideally, what you're looking for in a musical is somebody who can do all three.
Right.
Sure.
Now, granted, in many musicals, there are some non-singing roles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And usually that means that person doesn't have to dance either. But not always. Sometimes they're an actor-dancer.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they're an actor-dancer-singer.
Mm-hmm.
And so it never came to blows, but we always had to work through
Right.
compromises.
We are getting to the end of our time. My goodness. Time's gone by fast.
This has been education here.
Yes.
I ask questions because I'm curious about a lot of it. But now, one I was going to ask, you played in some of the plays when I would come down and see them. You were in a few of them.
Yes,
And was that by choice or by necessity?
by the time you were coming, it was by necessity.
Yeah.
I took over roles when somebody dropped out. I had auditions and had nobody who could play a part. When I was first here, I went to the board and said, I want to play this part, and a board member sat in on auditions.
Okay.
Oh.
After that, I said, I'm not doing this again. If I'm in a play, it's because I don't have enough actors
Yeah.
or I don't have the right actors.
I always look forward to you the night of the play, and the music is playing, and pretty soon the lights go, and then you walk out in your black tuxedo and do the announcement. I thought, oh, how impressive he was.
Well, I only wore the tuxedo opening night.
Yes.
So you must have come opening night.
Yes, I probably did. I did a lot.
Well, I know your daughter was in several
Oh,
shows.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
We did a joint show with Junior League, and I always tell people that it was, there were a lot of problems, but the biggest value of doing that show is Linda Stamp, her daughter,
Oh.
auditioned.
Oh.
Scared to death, but was great in the show and went on to do dozens of shows with me and went on to do a lot of directing herself. A remarkable talent, and it's fun to discover people who haven't done this before and
Okay.
watch how they blossom.
And then she got her husband and her sons into it, too.
Yes,
And they did a good job.
yeah, I think I worked with all the boys,
Yeah.
and I worked with Dave.
Yes. Joey went on to be up in the booth. He worked technical.
Yeah,
He liked that part. And then Zach was an actor. Michael was a good actor. So they all had their parts. They would audition, I'm sure, as everybody does. And then I went over to the Children's Theater and saw some plays over there when the boys were smaller and in some of those plays.
Wow.
My favorite one of them was A Christmas Carol when Zach was Tiny Tim.
ah,
I like that one.
Hey,
that
Chuck,
was probably a playout show, not a children's theater show.
No, it was on the big stage.
Chuck, I have an idea. How about if we have a Friendship Village wide production and you can direct? I don't know what it would be, but do you ever get an itch to maybe?
Not really, no.
No. Okay. All right.
Cross that off. Huh?
The thing that might be fun to do a reader's theater show.
Yes, a reader's theater would be good. We talked about that with Greg too. We'd like
Oh,
to,
yeah, that's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
To do a reader's theater, that would be fun.
That way everybody wouldn't have to learn.
No.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I saw a program like that in Cedar Falls couple of years ago, and the scene was kind of like a radio studio setting, and the actors were reading, of course, and they had sound effects, and it was, I forget.
Well, Greg has produced a number of Readers Theater shows at the Hearst Center,
Right.
and I've been in a couple and directed a couple of those.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that doesn't take as much rehearsal time.
Sure. Okay. Well, that could be fun too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Excellent. But I hate to say it again, but we have run over our time, so we need to cut this a little short. And sometimes we get interviews that just kind of go on, and we don't want to stop them, and we can think, let's make this 2 sessions and not just one. So we're kind of at that point here, and it's been most interesting. Thank you.
Well,
Chuck,
thank you for
coming.
having me.
Yes, yes. Any closing words? Mary?
No, like I said, it's been very educational for me, and I asked questions that I wanted to learn from. So.
Sure, sure. Well, we hope you guys out there that have been listening have enjoyed this podcast, and don't forget our sponsor, the Auxiliary Organization.